Hello, everybody. Arfter here. I have Wenderz on the mic. We're going to go over some of the UUBL, like a little bit of history, some of the survey results, some stats and stuff like that from previous tournaments and surveys. Here I have Wenderz. Wenderz, go ahead and introduce yourself because I don't think a lot of people have heard your voice.
So as you call tell, I am Wenderz. I'm the known as the ADV UUBL guy in the cycle here because I was the one perhaps who put the most effort initially at least at bringing attention to the ADV UUBL tier as well, a tier, a metagame of itself, instead of just being a bat list and a relic of Smogon old tiering, just staying over the past 20 years. And I did this by opening a thread back in 2019, where I would provide sources such as a viability ranking as well as sample teams. Even though back in the day it was mostly from a few experiences with the metagame, which I played back in 2018, where there was a lot of spotlight, where the tier was still called the ADVBL, and where Moltres, Charizard, and Breloom were still allowed, while Raikou, Regis, and P2 were not. So it was mostly a Fury morning at the time, but as the years went on, there was like development, interest from other people, other led of spotlight, and there was a huge surge of interest last year, especially where T or T, I don't know how to pronounce it, came into the scene and just started to get things moving in order to have like actual bigger tournaments than the tournament spotlights we had the previous years. We ended up even being featured in team tournaments such as ADV, Lower Tier League. And the subject of today, we have the most recent like big tournament, Raikou or Raikou is Skill, which means a tournament where Raikou was not available. And yeah, that's the gist of it.
Another big piece of that was the revival tournament. There was a lot of players that joined in that. Obviously, Jimothy Cool has a lot of influence over what people play and where and when. So he, being kind of part of Revival, sort of helped boost the numbers of people playing that, and that tournament had a really big prize pool. That's where I joined. I was looking for a chance to jump into UUBL for a while, but I wasn't sure what the tier would look like because like Sandless ADV OU has kind of a negative stick to it for being way too stally. You know, you get like 200 turn games where it's Suicune versus Blissey because the sand just isn't up. And so I was looking at UUBL like, oh, Vaporeon and Chansey are in here. It's just going to be more of that. But then I started playing it and it became my favorite tier at the time. So you said that Raikou was the most recent team tour. We have the survey results that along the lines of that conversation. People's favorite meta was Raikou at 56.5%, and then off to the side of that graph kind of shows that more people have played that, but it's still like adjusting for the number of players, still the most favorite. So, Wonders if you don't mind just elaborating why that might be the case.
Oh,
Like, what are your thoughts on that?
so first of all, like, since it's the most recent tour, and some people even joined while the tour was going on or a bit before, and probably never played the Raikou variants even meta games that were before that time, where there was like Meta Charm and Speed Pass was allowed, as well as Reversal and Flail, and potentially even like old Pokemon that used to be labeled as BL, such as Charizard, Balloon, or perhaps even Moltres. There will be probably some a recency effect here because they probably have more experience in Raikou less and nothing else, and thus by default it will be their favorite. And simply because Raikou was always a controversial one, and opinions might have also shifted as time went on when there was like actually when they were actually playing a meta game without Raikou and not just theorizing what it will look like. because in the survey that we ran last year after the revival tournament, there was like only 25% of the people who voted were in favor of banning Raikou, and which was the same number for Medicham, by the way. But as time went on and where Raikou was actually played, people enjoyed like the greater team building freedom that opened with Raikou not being present anymore, because it's usually a Pokemon that is buff, that centralized the tier quite a bit. That is also very demands a lot of respect both in team building and in practice, and thus I was not having to face it anymore was probably a huge burden in both in team building that was lifted. Players were had like more incentive to experiment with the larger UUBL list than they used to.
Yeah, that was definitely a main point of the results of this survey. Is at least 5 people noted that what they enjoyed about Raikou was the variety, not having to have Raikou plus 2 pieces to check Raikou. Definitely gives way to a lot more options in the team builder and a lot more other Pokemon that can stand up to tier that is so centralized.
Yes, I can definitely feel that the few times I played without Raikou as well, because it demands so much respect in team building, and to go into really why Raikou was a controversial Pokemon, I will uh, make a bit of comparison with how it performs in OU and the limiting factors that it has to face in OU compared to UBL. First, there's no Sandstorm, which is quite a boon for Raikou, especially for sub-Calm Mind variant, which does not have to like permanently give up on any health it has to concede every time it uses sub, but it's just very useful to get leftovers and recovery for both Raikou and a ton of other Pokemon, such as Regis, of course, as well as and that there's no Dog Trio, of course, so it doesn't like live in the fear of being trapped, and perhaps not Dog Trio, but just no like strong, faster Earthquake user. Period. Like if I'm not mistaken, the fastest Earthquake user is Sceptile, which is nowhere near strong enough to actually revenge kill Raikou, unless it holds a choice band. And even though I'm not sure if it gets the one hit KO, and even if it does, it's like hyper specific and just not good generally. Like other fast Pokemon such as Alakazam is a hit on the special side, and Sceptile as well, while other physical oriented Pokemon such as Crobat and Dodrio are not strong enough to get anywhere near a one-hit KO on a Raikou, even when holding a choice band. So basically, you get that Pokemon that's very threatening with a Calm Mind up, and that outspeed nearly everything relevant, and the few things that outspeed it cannot revenge kill it reliably or trap it like Dugtrio can in OU. And you even have the slower, bulky potential Pokemon that run Earthquake are not as bulky as the likes of Metagross or Tyranitar or Claydol in OU for the most part. Like Regirock has a bulk, but it's not strong enough to get the KO with Earthquake, and it doesn't have a and it's not backed by a Sandstorm, which could like finish the job in case it barely missed the KO. And then another factor that's quite a boon for Raikou in this tier is that the question of which Iden power it has to run usually is not as much of a dilemma as it might be in OU. Like it's much easier to afford not hitting the likes of Steelix or Lantern in UUBL by picking HPIs than, let's say, missing the getting walled by Swampert in OU because you decided that you would prefer not getting walled by Celebi and Flygon instead.
Hidden power is like splitting it is a lot easier in OU compared to UUBL because there's only a handful of Pokemon that you would need to consider splitting it for, and even so, like even the wrong hidden power can kind of get the job done after a certain number of calm minds.
Yeah, like in UUBL, I think at +1 you get you need to put the Stelix under 40% to get the KO. And against Lantern, well, that matchup can be a bit complicated if it's a substitute Raikou.
Because while Lantern might be able to wall Raikou behind a substitute and a calm mind up, there's not much Lantern can do about that either. It doesn't have roar, it doesn't have the physical ability to run like a physical move.
Yeah, it does have options like unconventional options such like Amnesia or Mimic, but they are costly in terms of move slots. And it's mostly like there's a bit of 50-50s involved. Lantern can actually guarantee the break on Raikou substitute at +1 with a surf if it's modest, which it should be. But after that, it's basically a 50-50 of is it gonna substitute again and should I click surf or is it gonna calm mine and I should like use a T-wave or toxic. And even if the lantern can technically afford to mess up the 50-50 in some position, if the Raikou begins at full health, it can get run over. Unless it has again like a very niche move like Amnesia or Mimic that is basically specific for that matchup move.
And you can see why players might get a little bit tired of Raikou when it's that strong that even its checks have to sort of deal with 50-50s or guess what hidden power it is. And meanwhile, Raikou is really easy to build with. You don't have to question as many things. It's just leftovers, Calm Mind, Thunderbolt, and then two other moves usually. And so, looking at the subplot of data, even removing players who have only played Raikou and only played Raikou, it's still in favor of Raikou. And like you said, the previous survey was 25% ban Raikou, and I think that the one of the big differences in these numbers is just the wording of the question. Like, should Raikou be banned is 25%, but what's your favorite isn't necessarily the same question as should Raikou be banned. I did that kind of on purpose, just to get people's feelings because most of the people who play Raikou don't actually want it banned, just to keep it open for the players who do like Raikou. Um,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah, see, it's a different question entirely. Yeah.
it's kind of between like a 50 and 60% split. That's a lot of people that they are just kind of being nice to that don't want to offend, and they don't mind playing Raikou, but they'd prefer Raikou. But in terms of Raikou coming or going, that's more along the lines of the data that we're looking at here is if Raikou gets taken back up to OU and we can't use it anymore, like at least half the players would not mind that.
Sorry, I would say which I consider to be to be a good thing because it's like we are. It's not like in the eyes of most players, it's not like the meta game will just fall apart and they will lose like all this interest in it if Raikou was to go.
Yeah, keyword being most players. We do have some survey answers that we'll get to in a minute, but for the most part, people will be fine if Raikou gets taken from us like Metacham was. Because people weren't too keen on just outright banning Metacham, but when it got taken like without notice, people didn't mind that.
Medicham was like a big threat and it was like a big progress maker as well, but it did not have a profile as unique as Raikou does, at least not in UBR, because if you want a fighting tiebreaker, you have other options than Medicham that you can like realistically replace it with, such as Machamp or Blaziken, which of course they are not just like Medicham but worse. They have other attributes and other things they lack and that they cannot compensate for what Medicham used to do, such as for instance, something that was that some player miss a bit when Medicham was gone is that Medicham's fake out was considered to be the most splashable priority in the tier at the time, and now that it's gone, there are like other fake out user, but they don't have they are not as splashable as Medicham was, or they have another time fitting it. It depends on case by case. But like the main attraction of Metagame being able to be a fighter breaker, which is quite key in a metagame where, well, to answer um, some special walls that are used against Raikou and other like a big special threat such as Alakazam and Kingdra and others are mostly fighting type weak Pokemon such as Registeel and Regice and Chansey and even Umbreon somewhat. So some fighting types naturally fit alongside them, but it can be replaced. Like the role of taking advantage of those special work can be done arguably perhaps even better by Matcham because it has like guts to take advantage of incoming T-Wave and Toxic. But then Matchup is not like as worrying as Medicham used to be in big part because the coverage move are nowhere near as strong as Medicham and because it's slower than even Adamant Dragonite, which is an extremely important aspect that Medicham had.
Like you had said earlier, with Raikou leaving, I feel like a lot of people might have been worried because there's just no electric types to replace it, like fighting types can with Medicham. Um, like there's
Electric.
a couple of electric types that you can see, like Lantern, I guess, but they're nowhere near as powerful as Raikou.
On the subject of Lantern, this was like my main worry because, as we discussed, one thing that I noticed back in 2018 was that there was no electric type before Raikou dropped to UUBL in the whole UUBL list, and that's forcing out Vaporeon's standard defensive Vaporeon was very difficult at the time through sheer power because you had to, it could basically check offense the entire offensive metagame. You even if you had like a choice bender, it could just like protect the scout and switch accordingly, or even just stay in and either like let's say you're using Machamp with a cross chop, potentially deplete your PPs or wait until you miss. Or if you play like a choice band normal such as Doloyo and Tauros, just wait until you kill yourself with a double-edged recoil and just scout you in general. And there was like no electric type to really take advantage of Vaporeon, and most of the UU ones uh, just did not fit that criteria. For instance, if Vaporeon decides to invest a bit in special bulk, and even without, I'm pretty sure it can like lift two Thunderbolt from the likes of Manectric and Electables, and to it KO them in return. So basically, it could like 1v1 even electric types, or that you will use in the absence of Raikou. And the part I was worried about regarding Lantern is that I consider the impact of Raikou to be good against Vaporeon because it's an electric type that is both strong enough and bulky enough to actually take surf from Vaporeon, and also just actually punish it on the protect turn because it could set up. Vaporeon could not just heal itself and come back to free because it needs 2 turns. So on the turn that it uses Wish, if the Raikou comes in and it just decides to stay in to heal itself, the Raikou could use a Coal Mine or Substitute, and I think that dynamic was something desirable at the time. And another dynamic that I found was cool is that Raikou will bring more incentive to use another electric type, which is Lantern, which also happens to be like the most suited uh, electric from EU to actually face off Vaporeon because it doesn't mind Surf or like Ampharos. It isn't afraid of receiving a surprise hydro pump from a faster and stronger Vaporeon on the Switch. But seemingly, I was partially wrong about that because even in UBL without Raikou, Lantern still retain was in fact even more successful than with Raikou because it still retained the appeal of being an electric type and probably the best electric type available, even without one of the Pokemon that made it um, that gave it a reason to be played in the first place.
Kind of a abrupt transition here, just to keep things moving. Talking about like Raikou going up and down and things like that. One other Pokemon that we've been looking at is Registeel. What people's opinions are about Registeel potentially moving up to OU. The data here on a survey question about what people would like to explore metagame wise included some Registeel list options. The most desired one, I guess you could say, is uh, a meta without Registeel or Raikou, which are the two most clear options for OU to move up. I've seen talks about Vaporeon here or there, but really it's just Registeel and Raikou. And so, what do you think about Registeel's place of? Because Registeel seems to be the one more likely than Raikou to go. Um, what do you think about like a meta where Registeel is OU but Raikou stays? Should we sort of look at bumping Raikou up as well and ban it from this format, or what are your thoughts there?
In my opinion, yes. To be clear, I was always a bit on the fence, but still favorable to Raikou being in the tier, even with the respected demand on team building. I think the pros outweigh the bad when it comes to its presence in UUBL. However, it's also in that spot where it's it's still quite suffocating to play against, and the metagame, in my opinion, can hardly afford to lose any of its main check to it, and uh, this includes Registeel. In fact, Registeel is probably the most common of the Pokemon out of those that it is the most common Pokemon out of the Raikou checks. And I think it's also one of the most reliable because it's very straightforward. Sometimes like Raikou can make some decision with like making some weird magic with its force like Philos move slots, or just switch hidden power even if the cost of not running HPIs can be quite hard to get over some of its usual check. Whereas like Registeel just has a very straightforward matchup against Raikou most of the time. It's just go in, tank to boost its Thunderbolt, and just click Earthquake twice, assuming you have the spread to get the 2-hit on Raikou. And compared to other special walls such as Regis and Chansey, which usually cannot get rid of Raikou within two turns, and thus are more prone to get crits before they can get rid of it. Whereas Registeel only needs like two turns most of the time to get the job done. So if it live, I think it's best that Raikou. If it has to live, I think it's Raikou should definitely follow. But of course, if that happens, I will ask the player base on how they feel about that before.
Yeah, of course. Player base is, from my perspective, has always been sort of your focus. Is that a lot of the times you've expressed opinions, but you said that like whatever the general population wants is more important, and I mean that's just good leadership, I guess, of a tier.
Thank you. Well, I think that should be the default mindset on Smogon.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we see a lot of the time that's not.
Perhaps someday every player base will be able to decide what they deem best for their tier.
So the next question was: should OU by technicality Pokemon be allowed? 82% said yes, so that's like a vast majority of people want OU by technicality in, and so that would include what's currently Raikou, Regis, and Porygon 2, but potentially also like if, for example, for whatever reason, Cloyster dropped to OU by technicality, that would be allowed in the tier. We did have a couple of responses from people that either just had no opinion or just outright said no, OU by technicality should not be allowed. So, what are your thoughts on that? And particularly, Jof was talking about how it's kind of raises the question of what is the tier of UUBL if we're allowing OU by technicality.
Well, first of all, like since we were declared to be an official metagames, not my word, by the way, I think from Goldmason and Milk, I think, uh, we essentially can enjoy some degree of freedom, such as, well, making clauses or bans as we see fit without having to go through the usual Smogon bureaucracy. And that also applies here, which like from a like strict identity point, I can understand the side that just stick to what is labeled UUBL and nothing that is above. And perhaps some of just an hypothesis on my end, but some of the people who voted no here also are people who want just Raikou gone, and perhaps think that if Regis and P2 have to go alongside it, so be it. I don't know. But I think it's basically since the goal of the tier is to give a home to the Pokemon that are just stuck in that limbo that is UUBL without a tier of their own, and the OU by technicalities, so those that are considered to be historic OU, but no longer are like proper OU with a clear place in the metagame can still apply to the description of UUBL in the sense that they don't make the cut for OU, so we're giving him the same home as the other like 40 plus Pokemon that are in the same position.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the people in the yes vote are thinking too, is just being able to, like, even though it's called UUBL, kind of the point is to let you use anything in between UU and OU, and so that would include BL as well as OU by technicality. I think that's a
And
big
also,
portion of the yes is just letting Pokemon be able to be played.
I'm also a bit biased because I back between like 2019 and 2021, I asked quite eagerly, or was like really hoping that Regis will drop, which eventually happened. And I think it's Regis' presence in the tier, even without Raikou, is a net positive. So I will be quite sad to see it go. Raikou, I could live with it, and P2, I don't really care if it's OU or not. But Regis, if the metagame can keep it, then I will be biased toward whatever decisions allow us to retain Regis.
You've also been a proponent of splitting, well, not necessarily splitting, but dropping UUBL to UU, in which case Regis would no longer be a choice. It would just be like Regis P2 and Raikou would just be off limits, as well as any potential future OU by technicality Pokemon. What would your feelings be about dropping UUBL to UU, because that's a very popular topic?
Uh, in spite of what I said earlier about wanting to keep Regis, I would still be favorable to that option. Because it will like final because I still consider just the huge list of UBL being just a relic of a flawed tiering process from over 20 years ago. And so correcting this and at the end of the day, getting the tier to have more like traction and being featured in official tournaments will be a benefit in terms of interest and activity in for the player base, I think.
Yeah, because right now the only team tour that we have is ADV and that's the only one that we'll probably ever be a part of because there's only so many people that actually play UUBL and other generations. So there's not like a UUBL Olympiad or a UUBL Premier League or anything like that.
That said, and I will be in favor, but that's realistically not going to happen anytime soon. If we do drop UUBL to UU, to basically rebuild the lower tiers from the ground up. And of course, like for instance, a new player and ZU player will probably be at least worried, if not outright against it, because they enjoy the meta games they have, and they don't want to be thrown into that uncertainty of losing of getting a meta game that's completely foreign to them. But part of the reason why I brought interest to UUBL back in 2019 is because there's like over 20% of fully evolved Pokemon sitting here in here, and most of a good number of them are either barely viable in the tiers above or not at all. So, which to me defeats the point of having tier a bit in the first place, because one of the reasons we tier generations by metagames is that the majority of Pokemon can enjoy some viability in at least one tier through the generation. And if you fuse UBL and UU into one single metagame, you are being a bit counterproductive to that intention, in my opinion, because a lot of UU Pokemon will just be straight outclassed in or just very very niche in every metagame they are part in. If they were to share the same metagame as you build, basically stuff like Walheim, what else? Sizer, for instance, is a Pokemon that's very good in UU, and in UBL it's basically unviable, or at least I never seen someone successfully pull off anything with it. And the list of unviable Pokemon goes on, and you make the list of Pokemon that don't have any niche in any tier in ADV. I don't know if it's bigger than without dropping UBL. You basically extend that status of being unviable to some Pokemon that are currently UU.
I can understand the reason why some people would not want to just uproot everything below UUBL because it's in kind of a weird place. It'd be different if it was like if this was a tier between I don't know RU and NU where it only affect a couple below it, but being UUBL, it retiering it would be everything except for Ubers and OU.
Exactly. I don't think you will get all the player bases on board with this anytime soon. I guess perhaps if like the current ADV RU community is on board with it, that could be another story. Because as far as I know, this tier is still like open to metagame shifts between well UU and RU, and maybe you will not need to do anything to the tiers below, but you will probably end up still with some like Pokemon that have like no niche in the entire generation, which does happen even in the generations that came out after some BL or UBL or whatever Pokemon probably in some generations simply are not good in the only metagames they're allowed in. Part of the reason why we have tier in the first place is to keep the number of unviable Pokemon anywhere to a minimum.
So another question on the survey was about per problematic areas, and the first question was, is paralysis an issue? 21% said yes, and then the rest is split between no and unsure. Um, Despite what I had sort of posted in the forum, I don't know if it really is a problem. It's just annoying. One responder said that paralysis problems is kind of just a Pokemon problem, like it's always been an issue. But in UUBL, it might feel that way because of the ground type matchups, and then also a lot of the heal bell users are also the team's special walls. Like you think of like Chansey, Articuno, Dragonite, kind of to an extent. And so if one of those gets paralyzed, your special wall is also kind of paralyzed as well.
In my opinion, first of all, I do agree with the sentiment that just paralysis being problematic is somewhat inherent to Pokemon because it brings an RNG factor that we will that I think is personally unneeded, but that's like on Game Freak for deciding that full para exists because the reducing speed alone, in my opinion, is not problematic and even can be desirable, at least in a metagame with Raikou. I think that Registeel, for instance, being able to paralyze Raikou, Alakazam, or Kingdra is something that the tier benefits, is something beneficial from the tier, from at least the ability to reduce the speed. But full para is definitely annoying to say the least. Even though I think that the a UBL is not like to where the counterplay to statues in general, including para, is like lacking because we still have like this, as you said, a decent bunch of UUBL users. We have a ground types, a fair share of like viable, usable ground types, although like some of them suffer from in a metagame without Raikou, namely Steelix, which is like the biggest loser of Raikou living out of the every UBL Pokemon probably. And we even have like Pokemon with guts and Pokemon that can make like some good use of synchronize, such as Umbreon can realistically use it, and not against paralysis specifically, but for instance, Alakazam switching into Whizzing on a predicted Will-O-Wisp and getting to synchronize back its Will-O-Wisp is a mean of making progress against Whizzing that is, I think, definitely relevant. Not like super safe or anything, but it's a form of counterplay that I think is like healthy for the metagame and like endorse some statue spreader this way. But paralysis definitely can feel overwhelming, and I think I saw that in definitely saw that in a couple of games in tournaments, like for instance, Sizer doing well, but because it has to switch into Regis, the likes of Regis, of Registeel, and sometimes getting one-on-one against Miltank, which uses Body Slam and getting paralyzed and losing crucial turns because of Parallax can definitely be frustrating. That said, I don't necessarily think that Thunder Wave needs action just yet, but perhaps that sentiment will grow into the future, and we will. And if the player base ever decides that we need to do like I think ADVLC and DPP doubles, which I think straight up ban Thunder Wave, if it ever comes down to it, then I will go along with what the player base wishes.
The other question was regarding like the RNG uh, affecting things like accuracy, confusion, King's Rock. The only one that was above 50% as people identifying as problematic were accuracy reducing moves. But one user did put in a comment that just basically said they find all of these across the board to not have any place in a competitive metagame, but they didn't vote for any of them because they didn't see any of them being used, and so they don't have an issue with them, but they would opt to remove them if that was an option. And I kind of agree with that. Like, whenever you're using these, there's not really a game plan for it. Like, it's not, you're not putting King's Rock on to counter a specific Pokemon. You're not putting Quick Claw on to get past a certain speed benchmark. You're kind of just using these items to just hope they work.
I basically agree with these two statements. I don't have like a huge vendetta against like the any of those moves or items, but I also think that they don't bring anything of value to competitive Pokemon in general. So UBL included, and it's and the reason why I'm not like super into banning them might simply because I haven't faced them in the tier, or at least they didn't proc like if I ever faced a quick law user in UBL, it didn't proc that game. But if we can ban it, ban anything of the sort, then yeah, sure, I will be in favor of it if anything. And I agree with the sentiment that it's not really a strategy to use quick law or anything of the sort. It's as I said, you're just hoping that things go your way. Yeah, yeah. Well, I get along with that. I would just put like a nuance to one thing, which is send veil. I know that there's been like some manual attempts at manual sandstorm and with using like send slash, and it's but in that case, I think there's like a bit of value lost if we essentially get to functionally ban Cacturn, for instance, because I think Cacturn is not a good Pokemon on all in UUBL, but it still has like that tiny niche that I think is worth preserving, of like notably being a spiker that has a uniquely good matchup against the most common spinner in Donphan, and also being able to scale Blastoise as well, and having a couple of other good moves is something that is worth preserving, even if in the event that you might, if you might face an attempt at bringing a manual sandstorm, but which I think is not like big enough to like get rid of Cacturn in the process.
Yeah, unfortunately, I did forget to put Sandvale on there, but I'm a big fan of Cacturn. What we could do is just do like a complex ban of Sandstorm plus Sandvale on the same team. Like there's precedent for that because a lot of draft leagues already have that as an option.
Yes, and if there's really like a problem, if it's really problematic, if like the community decides that it's not worth the complex ban, which I personally don't have any problem with, but if like, let's say they just want Sunvale to be banned, then so be it, and we'll lose Cacturn and Sunslash, which is not like a big deal. It won't check the metagame too much, I think.
And in relation to bans, the current ones that we have, first Baton Pass, 60% said that they're fine with Baton Pass how it is, which at this time is uh, you can stat pass as long as there's no speed. Um, and then 21% said they want more Baton Pass limits, and then 13% said that they want to see some of those limits removed. The ones that want it removed are basically just speed pass. I don't think very many people would argue for trap pass. I did see that one time, but I think that that person's opinion might have changed since then. Um, but primarily just the inconsistent speed pass like Starfberry, Ancient Power, all that sort of stuff at least, is the opinion of people who want less. And the people who want more stated that they want Belly Drum Pass removed and then also Recycle Pass. Recycle Pass is interesting because they said that it specifically is there just to circumvent the Speed Pass ban. Like, there's no reason anybody would bring Recycle to UUBL at all unless they're trying to do Recycle Salakberry Pass, which again is just trying to get around an already existing ban.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, and I personally like I would be fine, but also if recycle were just added onto the list of things that cannot be run alongside Baton Pass. But I once again, since I like don't think I ever saw it like really successfully pulled or in a serious game or even a ladder game, so perhaps I like not too passionate on it yet, but yeah, I can definitely hear the argument that since it exists to bypass an existing clause, it should be lumped alongside everything that boosts speed. So yeah, I can get behind that if if there's a like a general consensus, more well, because like I was probably one of the I don't remember exactly if I said that in this if I said I wanted I think Baton Pass clauses were fine as is. I probably did, but and I don't know if every but I definitely didn't take it to account a recycle pass when voting, and but and I don't know how it is for the other 60+% of people who voted that the same as me.
So then the other part of current bans is reversal flail. By far, the majority of people say keep reversal flail banned, and then a couple people want to see them unbanned, and then a couple more people want them like sort of tested in the Raikou meta. Just to explain the Raikou one, we saw a lot of like stall rise in that, and so getting some more offensive pressure going would probably be of interest, especially without Raikou there being like a big offensive pressure to the tier. Um, but just generally, I'm of the opinion that we could try to see at least a flail unban, because I just think that looking at the flail users and the flail like checks and counters, I think those are a lot more interesting options to bring to the tier and can sort of help breathe some life into some of the rarer seen Pokemon like Zangoose or Kingdra, especially physical Kingdra with Dragon Dance Flail. And then like as a counter, Scizor. Scizor is a great flail counter, but we don't see it very often. Things like that. Um, the Pokemon that I would see problematic, obviously with reversal, there's Blaziken, because Blaziken can kind of like Swords Dance or Bulk Up, or like it has a million sets it could run um, in addition to reversal. And so it's kind of hard to tell with it, especially because it can just click a fire move. A blaze boosted stab fire move is going to take out a lot of the reversal checks, and so there's not a lot of option for it, especially like it's just a hard Pokemon to get around, especially because it has like you can just say Arcanine, but what if Blaziken just decides to Earthquake at half HP or something like that, or like Swords Dance Earthquake, Bulk Up Earthquake, something like that. And then for Flail, the only problematic Pokemon I can see just with my limited knowledge is Dodrio, because it's Spike immune. You can say, for example, have a choice band and then just bring it in on a slower Pokemon, click substitute like 4 times, and then swap it out, and then bring it back in to click choice band flail, and then choice band flail, and then choice band flail, choice band flail, because there's not a lot of Pokemon that can take that, and even if they bring something like Regirock or Steelix, you have 5 other Pokemon that can just respond to that, and so um, I think Dodrio might be a problem for Flail just because there's an easy way to answer its checks. But you played during Reversal Flail meta, and you're of the opinion that it should stay banned. So, what do you think about the Reversal and Flail?
Yes, that's right. I'm still of the opinion of that as someone who has like played in a metagame where both were allowed, even in a metagame where Metacham is no longer available because it was also a big user of reversal. But it was like, first of all, it was never like this Pokemon in particular is problematic and the rest is fine. It was like an issue across several Pokemon and potentially even stuff that were like not not tested too much, toyed with too much yet. So first of all, like, well, you for the people watching us, the reason why it's banned in the first place, well, it's because the consensus there's a clear consensus in the community that it should remain as such, and it's still true to this day, seemingly. And because first of all, there's no sandstorm, so Pokemon like Blaziken, Zangoose, and Dodrio still like get to still get to spam reversal slash flail at low HP, and also because the priorities are much more scarce in this metagame compared to some other lower tier where you usually have a top 5 Pokemon that commonly run priorities. Like in UU, you have Arcanine, and Sizer also commonly runs Quick Attack. You also and in NU you have Hitmonchan with Mach Punch. In UBL, the most common priority user used to be Medicham with a Fake Out, but even that doesn't work against Ender strategies in particular because they could just Ender on the turn of Fake Out, leave the hits, and just carry on with with the sweeping. Another issue was the sheer amount of Pokemon that learn one of these two moves, and they all don't share the same counter. Like for instance, yeah, you can check perhaps you can check Sizer with reversal Sizer with your Whizzing, but then you have Blaziken who is also using reversal and who gets a one-hit KO on Whizzing with a Blaze boosted overhit. Yes, you can use Dusclops to be immune to both, but you used to have Medicham and as well as Zangoose, which can use boosted Shadow Ball to really put a dent on it. And basically, there was like not a universal strategy aside from the few priorities, like Arcanine used to be a bit more common because of extreme speed, but it was like more common to be put in a team building predicament where you will have to put a quick attack, for instance, on your offensive Vaporeon so you don't lose to that strategy, which I don't think was a healthy dynamic to be put in that spot where you use a priority on a Pokemon that otherwise has no business earning it instead of other than checking reversal and flail. Also, another thing to consider is that Breloom used to be in the tier, and it was probably the best non-fake out priority user, which ran Mach Punch, and not only to not lose to this strategy, but just in general, so it's a faster Pokemon. And since it left the tier, it was no longer available. Another Pokemon that uses priority, not for the sole purpose, was Linun. But honestly, I don't think that pushing Linun usage is anything desirable in any tier, including UBL. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Linun can also use Flail and potentially by unbanning it, you can open that door to it and to Kingdra. And yeah, between like the choice of substitute to counteract statues, or even just like for instance you use a Sizer or Zangoose with immunity so they don't even fear statues, or you can just use, let's say, taunt on your Dodrio and just not have to care about it either. Like there was like many forms of counterplay to the counterplay you would use against it, so it can create definitely some scenarios where you're like, I'm facing that +2 Blaziken, for instance, and I have a Vaporeon, but should I attack it and potentially lose on the spot because of it? Or should I just potentially waste a turn and take a huge hit because it was not a reversal variant, but just a standard Sword Dance +3 attack. That sort of dilemma that could like potentially cost you the game or at least cost you a Pokemon because you guessed wrong.
Thanks for the input.
So now after that discussion about reversal flail, the next one is people's opinions of UUBL. The average is like the current average opinion out of 5 is 4.17, but then it drops to 3.56 when you look to the future. 3.5 is still pretty decent in terms, like it's above half, so it's still positive, but it's currently 4.17 is a really high rating for the playability of a tier. A lot of the players moved to 4, and then 3, 2, and 1 as you look to the future of UUBL. And so I just wanted to go over a few of the um, reasons for that. One of the players that rated 1 as the future of UUBL is because they think that it's going to drop to UU, and that's what they want. And so they think that the future of UUBL is just non existent. And so that's the reason for one of the ones. But I think that a lot of the people playing would be for that. So it's not necessarily a bad rating. It's just that's kind of an awkward question to answer when you believe that the tier is going to not exist anymore. Another one of the ones is somebody said, basically combining what they said on the other questions, that if we unban Reversal, Flail, and keep Raikou, that they would play the tier again, and they currently don't. The two is worrying about Registeel being gone, the just general instability of the tier coming off that. And then the two threes, one of them again is just the split of or the drop of UUBL to UU, and it just won't have anything to play in UUBL anymore. And so a lot of these look like they're going down. Quite a number of them are just, normal concerns or being not knowing how to answer the question for what if the tier just doesn't exist in the future. Um, any comments regarding uh, these statistics of what people's opinion of UUBL is in general?
Well, um, in terms of like enjoyability or just opinion of the metagame, it's fairly similar to what we had last year, which is cool to see because it's overall a positive reception, and I wasn't like delusional about the potential of such a metagame back in 2019, because seemingly the opinion that it's a pretty fun metagame, even if it's a ban list initially, is shared among multiple people and not just me me personally. And about the future of UBL, well, I think I also voted for because I also completely understand and share that uncertainty regarding Registeel living, because even if Raikou goes alongside it, Registeel is still like both a huge gatekeeping mon and a Pokemon that is used to handle a bunch of things. So leaving it with, well, could lead to more variety in the tiers, but also potentially losing a defensive staple that is important in our metagame without Raikou. So that's basically my stance of it. I think I agree with the majority of people who voted for both of these questions.
One thing I forgot to mention is the upcoming LTL tournament. Because Raikou is so popular, and because it was kind of a contention last year, one of the responses suggested that Raikou and Registeel just be tournament banned. And so I was thinking about that for a while. Like, should we try and see if Raikou should be banned in this year's LTL? Should we kind of move Registeel along those lines as well, or you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing that happened last year happens, where just in the middle of the tour they're like, okay, Registeel's OU now, and so now there's this chaos of like trying to refigure out the meta in the middle of a team tour. But one thing I had thought of is just sort of suggesting for LTL for the at least captains or maybe the tier or the tournament organizers to vote on is, should UUBL slot be OU by technicality or specifically UUBL and lower Pokemon, um, so that they have kind of the option of, there's a lot of options here of what we could do in terms of keeping Raikou or keeping it Raikou out of the tour. What are your opinions on that? Because that's sort of more of an administrative decision that's going to come up pretty soon here.
Me personally, I will be in the camp of Yeah, as long as they're not OU proper, they are fair game. Both Registeel and Raikou. And since it's the playable, the current playable uh, showdown format allows them, allows the OU by technicality mode, I think we should just go alongside with this. However, it's a good thing that you bring it up because it's probably a discussion we didn't have with the player base yet, so it's probably worth bringing up. And as for the managers, I don't know. I don't know if this discussion with like we will influence their decision or the decision of the host. If we reach the let's say the consensus that we are not allowing Raikou and Registeel in this next iteration of the ADVLTL, but my stance on it will be as long as they are not officially OU, they should be legal. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I guess that's a cross that bridge when we get there type of deal.
Yes.
I guess the plan is just leave it as is challengeable, and then if somebody raises a question about that, then at that point we could uh, discuss it with the LTL tournament. But that does open it up to discussion for the Discord or just the general player base here listening to it.
Yes, that's definitely something worth bringing up to the player base, I think. By the way, I just remember that we kind of glanced over like the belly drum pass clause or like potential ban, and to that I think I'm currently somewhat neutral on it because I do think that the main form of belly drum being the attention to belly drum as a move is definitely understandable, like because some people think Linun is quite dumb and just not like beneficial to the or like doesn't bring anything desirable for the metagame. I think I share that sentiment. I don't think it's ban-worthy yet, like in that I don't think it's broken or anything just yet, but it definitely is not something that the metagame benefits from, in my opinion. And just to Bedrum's pass specifically, I think it's directed at Smelgol, which can like potentially well BP plus 4 to a Crobat or Swallow or a Dragonite that will boost its speed with agility or something, and that can like cover get its BP against phaser either by sleeping them with Spore or just against faster threats with by using a +6 extreme speed against them, because even if it's mere goal against Pokemon against most Pokemon that are faster, it can like still cover them nicely.
Yeah, I think that's the big problem with Smeargle is when you see it belly drum. Well, first off, when you see Smeargle, you assume first turn it's going to Spore, but then when you see belly drum, it's kind of a question of, is it going to pass the belly drum? Is it going to extreme speed? Is it going to self destruct? There's a lot of lines for Smeargle at every step of that.
It's also like because if you assume that it's uh, a regular like spikes Smeargle, but you guess wrong, so that can be dangerous as well. Like let's say you want to cover for the potential BP Smeargle and you successfully sack something to sleep beforehand, but then let's say the thing you used to cover the BP was like your ace withing, but it's it turns out it's not a BP variant of Smeargle, it's just a regular spiker, so it gets more spikes than it should because you bring something slower that cannot kill it in one hit. That sort of thing also can be somewhat like similar to the dilemma of facing like reversal slash flail strategies where you're like either I'm being either careful and bringing something that will not make me lose on the spot if I guess wrong, or I comply with potentially getting 3 layers of spikes because I decided to play the most carefully against it. So I think I don't have like maybe not enough data to really push it as a problem, but it's definitely not something that I think I will defend and argue that it's beneficial for the tier two. I mean, Baton Pass specifically.
It's annoying and it's frustrating, but you don't see it very often. And so, it's the question of, is it worth banning just because it's annoying even though nobody uses it?
I guess unlike the likes of Quick Law and High Powder and other stuff, annoying stuff that you don't run into very often, is that you there's technically there is a strategy behind it this time. It's not just relying on luck, but it it also bring into these situations that I don't think are anything really desirable. And plus, Smeargle, by virtue of learning every move in the game, could like pull off some stuff like using taunt to shut down attempts at phasing it. Although, of course, this is risky because it's Smeargle, it's very frail, but sometimes it's getting the taunt right is just all you need to win on the spot. So
Yeah, that's true as well. Well, that's all the questions from this survey. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap it up? I know that it's getting a little late for you there.
I don't think, I don't think I have anything. I said my piece, unless you want to talk about speed pass, because it technically was another thing we didn't really talk about, but
Oh, yeah, sure. Um, so I will say that one of the comments said that the simply banning Spore plus Speed Pass would be one potential option. Another thing said that just like lifting the ban on the inconsistent Speed Pass, like Ancient Power and Silverwind and Starfberry. I guess for me, I don't really mind Speed Pass either way. I played the tier with it here and with it gone, and I don't think that it's. I think that it's consolidated enough that you know where it's going and when it's going to happen. Um, like for instance, you know that it's probably going to be passed to like Marowak or Machamp or something like that, and you know the few Pokemon that get like agility, baton pass, and stuff like that. But at the same time, I don't think that I think that the tier is diverse enough that we don't necessarily need that, and there's plenty of like team building options and stuff like that. But I don't have an opinion either way on that. What about you?
in my case, I'm fairly and even quite strongly pro speed pass ban. First of all, well, because OU did it first, but even regardless of that, it's also it's once again something that can lead you in these situations like you're facing a Dodrio, your first reflex is to switch into your normal resist. Let's say it's a Registeel, but turns out it uses agility and it passes, and potentially you're lost on the spot. Perhaps you can like boom explode with your Registeel because you have it, but maybe the Odrio user took that into account and just decided to substitute with it, and just you boom into nothing and you're facing a plus to the Odrio that can BP to whatever they have in the back. And so once again, it creates those kind of situation where you can either lose a mon or you might just be content with losing a mon if that doesn't mean losing other spots. And especially because I think it's a speed pass is more detrimental to standard bulky offense, like let's say traditional build with like a Spiker plus Raikou plus Dragonite plus Regis plus two other things than it is to like more defensive build. So it's like a, a bigger threat for like non-hyper offense or like non-focused teams that are focused around speed pass than it is for defense. Like for instance, let's take a Dragon Dance Smeargle BPing to because it used to be Medicham used to be there, and you could like BP Dragon Lance to Medicham, and for most like defensive build, it doesn't matter for them if they're facing a +0 or +6 in speed Medicham. But for offense, that's an entirely different story. If the Medicham is granted to outspeed the Raikou or the Quillfish and the Dragonite and everything else for that reason.
Yeah, yeah. The speed pass pushing through defense is something that I've never really understood because most defensive teams are typically slower than the offensive Pokemon, anyways. And so I don't see the value of adding speed onto Pokemon that are typically faster.
Yes, the argument I heard on that topic is like this allows the let's say the Marowak to outspeed the potentially speedy Vaporeon or the Articuno that is sometimes used in Stallish builds, but once again I think that it's more detrimental to to standard offensive build than it is to defensive one that typically first have an easier time stacking multiple phasing users compared to more offensive build, and also because once again there are strategies for like every potential BP passer to potentially play around the phasing counterplay like Smeargle can just put you to sleep and Dodrio can potentially use Taunt and Scizor is not really afraid if you're going to explode and that sort of stuff. And plus, of course, there's Ninjask, which used to be one of the biggest complaints of the metagame back when it was allowed. Because so once again, there was like seemingly a clear consensus among the community that speed pass was brought more undesirable aspect to the tier than the other way around. Just like in OU. And even in OU, I would say that there was a bigger argument, in my opinion, to keep speed pass because you could like use let's say a non-cheesy strategy with like agility Zapdos where you genuinely try to sweep with your Zapdos and if you see you can you can make sure that you don't lose your agility boost by passing to something else that is not just meant to win turn one against the opposing team. Whereas in UBL, I don't think I ever saw an agility Scissor or Dodrio that like genuinely try to use the speed boost for itself before passing to something else.
What do you think about the Starfberry? Because I think that Swallow definitely takes a hit without Starfberry, but do we need Swallow?
I think I prefer if the swallow just sticks to let's say a reliable berry like a lychee berry or something, and that it's going to pass to something that can use it instead of like betting on luck and getting the speed. Also, you can make the argument that it can adapt to whatever boost it gets and then choose the target of its battle that it's going to receive the boost.
Yeah, and that's the kind of difference in strategy, I think, is that the Swallow Starf Pass team has, like, whatever Swallow gets from the Starfberry, it can give to something on the team to benefit from it. So it's a little bit less RNG, but it obviously speed is one of the options that it can get, but not all the time.
I think I will still favor like the integrity of the clause over that possibility. Although I, if let's say big enough there's a big enough like consensus to get to make an exception for Staff Bay from the community. I would not mind too much like changing the rule to bend to the player base wishes regarding that. But like because we mostly just went with from what I remember from with OU with what I think the OU clause is, which also removes Staff Bay. And regarding and and since I don't think I commented on Silverwind and Ancient Power,
Yeah,
well, in that case, the main argument I could see is not really like the possibility of getting the boost and passing to something to something else, but more so like there's this hypothetical sizes set with like swords ends, BP, an HP, let's say HP ground of your choice, and you want to use a bug stab move, but you already dedicated an HP to your as coverage, so you want to use a silver wind as your stab, and in which case it's unfortunate that you cannot use it because it violates the clause. And again, if like there's some sort of consensus from the community to allow this, then I could hear it. I wouldn't mind like once again modifying the clause to go along with what the player base wants.
Yeah, that's one of the uh, big things is just what do the players want, and that's the point of this whole survey is just trying to figure that out with numbers. Well, hopefully that spawns a decent amount of discussion. I've already seen a bit of it, seen some exploration, and in the Discord tournament that's about to start right now, we see that Azure has kind of just removed all of the RNG items and stuff like that from it, and so we'll see probably a little bit more discussion around those as to whether they're really necessary or not. Thanks for joining this call and for the all the rescheduling attempts.
Thank you as well for suggesting of this conversation in the first place and getting everything ready.
I always like when like the administrative people in charge, quote unquote, or like tier leaders or whatever are more people facing, so that it's not just like, oh, this mysterious person is making all the decisions for us and I don't know who they are or anything like that. So yeah, thanks, and that's it.
Thank you and good evening and see you.